I was just doing a meetup for fun, right? But basically, a few times people said, "Oh, we'd love to co-work together. That'd be great." And so that's when I started a new business, which was Ramen Club. Most of the people came from me inviting them personally, like DMing them. People don't understand in the early stage, you should not be above like DMing people that you know and maybe that you don't know as well to join. They have that saying, nothing brings a crowd like a crowd. Maybe what we could have done differently. I think if we just embraced SEO a bit more like early on, we probably could be bigger than we were now. People listen more when a human that you've heard do it actually tells you a piece of advice, more so than reading a blog post from someone you don't know who maybe has some hidden agenda. Accountability is one of those weird things where like a lot of people like say they want it, but they don't want as much as they say they want, basically.
Yeah.
What I found that people like actually want is venting about like challenges that they're having and troubleshooting, which is like helping each other solve problems. Making content is fun, but like making tools that get used repeatedly is, for me, is a little bit more fun. Sometimes we create free tools which we think are relevant for our audience and launch them, and it's a good source of traffic, and it's, you know, I think it helps build your brand, your community. An additional benefit of doing a live interview with your existing members is just like it helps your other members get to know like other members. If you're an introvert, it's easier to host a meetup than attend a meetup, which sounds insane. But it's actually true because you just have a reason to talk to anyone. Your community is not just on Discord or Slack. It's also on Twitter. It's also like users' email. Like you need to factor in these other touch points. The most commonly recommended book I give in community is Get Together by Bailey Richardson.
Welcome to another season of the Beginner Maths podcast, where operators of top community businesses share their tactics and strategies with you, so you can build your community business. Today, I am thrilled to have Charlie Ward, founder of Ramen Club, with me. Ramen Club, if you don't know, is a private community membership for bootstrapped founders to get community education and support. Welcome to the show, Charlie.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you, Nityesh.
Great to meet you, Charlie. Why don't you start by talking about how would you describe the people who are joining Ramen Club?
So Ramen Club, so yeah, we help, you know, mostly bootstrap SaaS founders basically reach their financial goals, like ramen profitability. Just a side note, ramen profitable just means the minimum revenue you need to survive without a job or investment, but it means it puts the power in your hands. It means you can just rely on yourself. So that's kind of why we focus on the area, and that number can differ from person to person, but primarily it's SaaS founders, but we have people building other things, like we've got some people building marketplaces or, you know, agencies or content business, but I'd say like 80% are SaaS founders. Mostly it's solo founders, and it's people who usually like are kind of early stage. So, you know, either they are the three camps kind of thing. So either they are just exploring to find their first idea, or they have idea and they've got like maybe making a few $100s a month revenue, but they're looking to grow their business. And we also get people who are like more established, you know, making like, you know, 5, 10K or more, but, you know, they're looking for like quality community to like spend their time, because we've got lots of people who are lots very far in their journey, but people stick around, you know, for a long time, you know, after they reach their goal. So it's not just people who haven't reached that goal yet, sort of thing. So yeah, I'd say that would probably define it.
Yeah, can you share how many people you have in the community?
Yeah, so we've got 130 paying members. We've got others in there who are like things like mentors and that sort of thing, who are there for free. We've also gifted a few subscriptions to a few people who have like quite specific circumstances and that kind of thing. I'd say about let's say like 30 of them are like in-person members, because we do co-working in London 2 days a week. And then yeah, the rest are online or remote members.
I love this. I have so many questions for you here. So I'm on the Ramen Club landing page, and I see like a lot of recognizable names over there. There's Weed.io, Senja, Simple Poll, all of these indie SaaS companies that people who are into it on Twitter will recognize. And then obviously our mutual friend Kurosh, who's building Meet Waves, as a part of the community. So it looks like you have collected like a really good set of people who are kind of like experts at building indie SaaS businesses. So
Yeah.
how has that happened? Has it like been you reaching out to these people once they have this business, or have they been more like, yeah, talk about that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a couple of avenues. So because I started a meetup in London called Indie Beers about 5 years ago. So it's a meetup for indie hackers in London to go to the pub once a month, basically, and it's very informal, very casual, just quite fun. Now it's in other cities. We have it in Lisbon, in Tokyo, and Lyon, and some other cities. But the oldest one's in London. But a lot of the people who are members of Rum Club have been members for like, 3 or 4 years, like since the beginning. And it's from relationships I built or friends I made like from back then. And a lot of these people who are successful now, back then they were just starting out. And a lot of these people are just like organically grown with us. And now they've run pretty successful businesses. You have like Elston who runs Tiny Hosts, Andy runs Data Fetcher, Valentin runs Find Email. There's just like a load of them who are doing really well now. And, over time, like a lot of people discover us through, say, like through Twitter, through referrals, through, reading interviews we've done in different places like here or like Starter Story and that kind of thing. And it's all just kind of added up. And so people who are a bit further along, want to join when they see it's a good community and we've got, a nice culture and nice members and successful members and stuff. And yeah, it just kind of happens organically over time.
This is really cool. And do you have like a little, I would love to give the listeners an example of what people who are in the community get when they're in it. So we have a case study showing like the before and after, revenue number for any of this where they were able to get to this amazing milestone after joining Ramen Club.
Yeah, so I mean, an example is a couple of those people I mentioned, Andy Cloak, who runs Data Fetcher, and Elston Bretto, who runs Tiny Host. So we put those two, and also Michael Christophides, who runs PG Mustard, who's a little bit earlier stage, but is doing well. We put those fellas in a mastermind when they joined. And since then, two of them, have gone from like 0 to 20K a month in Bara, basically. And so when people join, so we have a Slack, we've got co-working sessions, we've got 50K worth of discounts for different services like, AWS, Stripe, that kind of thing. We've got a very active community of like quality founders. So people just learn from each other, from like asking questions and answering them. The mastermind kind of keeps you accountable. We also run like co-working sessions in person, which is a really good way to like get things done and, to build real like good relationships with like other members. And we just share a lot of really good content and lessons in there and that sort of thing. And, that's like enough over time for people to do really well. And it's not to say that there's not more we want to add in the future. So, we want to add more kind of content. There's a lot of like feedback in the community that we just give over and over and over. And it kind of makes sense to turn this into kind of like our own framework that of like what we've seen work like so many times that it's not that this advice doesn't exist anywhere, but I don't think it's been put together in like a really coherent way sort of thing. And so, there's much more we want to do down the line with content and expanding our community offering.
Hmm, like this. So it's a lot of it is about giving like presenting the right information to the members at the right time and in the right like succinct or in the way that resonates with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of content out there already. It's just like, there's a lot of content doing the same thing over and over, but there's a lot of good content out there. And so what we do is just create a really good culture of like high quality founders where you can just like learn from each other and get the camaraderie you need because there's a lot of questions which also aren't covered by content because they're too specific or they're too niche or it's stuff that's changing really so quickly that no one's created a blog post about it yet or a podcast about it yet. So, consuming content is important and we share that content, but, learning from peer groups and people listen more when a human that you've heard do it actually tells you a piece of advice more so than reading a blog post from someone you don't know who maybe has some hidden agenda or that kind of thing. Yeah. I know of certain founders who, when they go on like a podcast, for example, they know their competitors are listening to like everything that they say on the podcast. And so they will deliberately say something which will send their competitors in the wrong way. And so you've got
Mm,
sometimes got to be careful about some of the narratives you hear and the on like public kind of forums like podcasts. I'm not saying like I'm doing this, but like I know of certain people who've done this in the past, right? And so with people that you actually know, that's very unlikely to happen. And I think people listen more to people who are in the same community as them and are all trying to help each other like move forward, for example.
mm. Yeah, I think I can attest to that. Like the power of having the same advice that you hear or you have read often on the internet, but having that be presented to you from somebody you know and who you even respect, that has a different way of, inspiring action in you.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. I think there's a greater level of trust of like community-based learning. Not to say that there's anything wrong with learning from content.
Yeah, no, I get it. Okay, can you tell me about your journey of getting the first few customers? So, for example, how did you get your first 10 customers? And then how did that strategy change to help you get your next 100 customers?
Yeah, so the first 10, oh, it was basically from an in-person meetup I did, Indie Beers, that in London. And that's how I met a lot of people in the sort of, you know, UK indie hackers scene and the wider tech scene sort of thing. So I kind of knew people from that originally, and it was a free meetup I did. And, if anyone listening to this is in a city where they feel there's not enough going on for like indie hackers or bootstrappers, I recommend trying to do like a simple meetup, whether it's just going to a walk or a pub or a bar, the beach. It doesn't have to be, in the pub. Like, there's lots of things you can do. You might be surprised by like the amount of people you can get out. And I'm very happy to help you set up a little local indie beers. So feel free to get in touch if you want to do that. So yeah, I started that way, and people asked me a few times. This is like, but I started doing this before I knew I was building a community business. I was just doing a meetup for fun, right? But basically, a few times people said, "Oh, we'd love to co-work together. That'd be great." And so that's when I started a new business, which was Ramen Club, which was at the time it was mostly co-working on Saturdays in a space in London. And so how I got my first sort of 10 customers for this was I basically I spent some time manually recruiting like the first sort of 10, 15 members. And what I did was I did a free co-working day at a space in London. So I invited like 15 or so people to this, just people I knew. I also put it in my newsletter. I put it on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I just kept
How
posting it
many
until
followers did you have at that point?
I probably had like 1,000 Twitter followers or something like that
Not a
at the
lot.
time.
Okay.
Yeah. And but I'd say most of the people came from me inviting them personally, like DMing them. Like people don't understand, especially for like, well, it's true for products and communities, but like in the early stage, you should not be above like DMing people that you know and maybe that you don't know as well to join. It's very common because once you have like they have that there's that saying, nothing brings a crowd like a crowd. Like once it's much easier to add people once you have people. So it's a bit chicken and egg.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can like say, oh yeah, so and so's coming, and then you tell that person, oh, so and so's coming, and they both come, and then you can like it's like I'm not sure I actually had to do that for this because I knew enough people who were interested, but like it's a common thing to like do that sort of thing. It
Yeah.
works pretty well, and so yeah, that's how it's just like a combination of manually inviting people, like Twitter, email, that sort of thing. And then we had like the first 15, 20 people for a free event. Then I said, okay, I sent out a survey after that saying, hey, how often would you want to come to this? Like, what feedback do you have? Roughly how much would you pay to come monthly or like, X times a month? And then I just crunched all this data and and made a proposition. And it was like, okay, it's going to be, this much per month to come to two events per month. Because at the beginning, this is before COVID. This was in October
Yeah.
2019, right? And that's how I got my first sort of 10, 15 customers and MRR, basically. Then after when COVID happened, then had to make it online only for a bit. So that's another story. But yeah, that's how I got the first sort of 10 or so customers, basically. I don't know if that's more information than you were expecting, but that's actually how it
No,
happened.
that's exactly the information that I was asking for, and I have a lot of follow-up questions here. The first one is, so you get your first 20 customers through reaching out. Now, how did
Yeah.
you get the next 100? Did it just happen organically from those 20 people telling other people about this?
Yeah. So, I'm just saying like how it happened with us, right? But this is not
Yeah.
to say we couldn't have done anything differently or better. But this is how it actually happened. What happened was it was really not one specific channel with us. It was a combination of multiple channels. So it was referrals from existing members who wanted to bring more people in. It was Twitter. A lot of people just found us through Twitter. A lot of people found us through like the Indie Hackers website, just finding posts that we done on there and that kind of thing.
What kind of post did you do on India's website?
Honestly, it was like this was like a while ago. Like some of these posts still get us members like years later, but like it was stuff like I think I did a post on like, the top 10 things I learned from like building an online community, for example, which is like a few years old now.
Mm,
And, just like updates on like new stuff we had in the community and that sort of thing. So, just things like
right.
that. It wasn't like a huge volume, but like it was enough to like make a difference, I'd say. We also had a newsletter. So the free meetup we had, Indie Beers, we still have a newsletter for that. And we have that meetup. And a lot of people just discovered us through that as well. So yeah, that's like kind of four different channels probably that we've just got members consistently until now. Now we're at like, 130 paying members or so. But if I was to say like maybe what we could have done differently, I think if we just embrace SEO a bit more like early on, we get some,
Mm,
Google traffic, like a few hundred per month, but like if we just focus on that since early on, we probably could be bigger than we were now because there's lots of
mm,
opportunities there. But that's just
right.
what maybe I would have done a little bit differently. And anyone listening to this, I wouldn't. If you don't know how SEO works, like it's one of the most high leverage things you can learn for building an online business that exists. So I would consider it. But yeah, that's kind of how our story happened, basically.
Yeah. I love that. I love this. I love how, this starting out of this, like it has such humbling starts, and this makes the makes the path achievable to almost everybody who is listening, who might want to start a community business. The second thing that I wanted to ask was, so I know like you're doing a few things right now, and tell me if those are built with the intention of helping get more inbound leads for the community. The first
Yeah.
one is the Find Your Co-founder tool that you built out. I was looking at that, and it has like more than 100 people signed up for it and have their names in the database. What was the reason behind it, and how's it going?
Yeah, so sometimes we create free tools which we think are relevant for our audience and launch them. And it's a good source of traffic. And I think it helps build your brand, your community that like, oh, you're building interesting stuff, for the wider community. So
Right.
around last May, so coming up to a year ago, we went to Ellen Humphreys, who's a member of Indie Biz, suggested, oh, she's a SaaS marketer, and she was saying it's kind of hard for marketers to find software engineering sort of co-founders, and so we just made a no-code tool basically on our website where you can just fill in some details on like who you are, like what you're building, and like who you're looking for. So you might be a developer looking for a marketer, you might be a designer looking for a developer. Like there's lots of different options, and it automatically like posts your details to two different Slack channels, Slack workspaces with, like about 1,500 members. It did also previously post to a few Twitter accounts, but like since
Mhm.
the API changed under Elon Musk,
Right.
actually it's much more expensive to do that now.
Yeah.
It currently, and that was a huge source of like new posts was Twitter. So we just need to figure out if we're going to pay the 100. I think it's like the cheapest API cost into it is like $100 a month or something. I need to check. But yeah, this when we launched on Product Hunt, we got a ton of traffic. It was good. People, I know people for a fact have like found co-founders on it and like found partners. So I know it's been like had some impact. We don't have a lot of analytics on it, unfortunately, because people just instantly it just gives their details off the site so they can just message each other. So we don't see
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I like this approach of free tools. Like I think it can be very effective. We've got some other ones that we're planning to launch as well in the future. So yeah, that's kind of something that we like doing for marketing. And I think it's more fun as well. Making content is fun, but like making tools that get used repeatedly is for me is a little bit more
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it's like you're tricking yourself to be a marketer by being actually like being a builder instead. So you're just building stuff out, and that helps you get the marketing glory.
Yeah, it just scratches the itch because everyone likes making stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, like I can't help it sometimes. But yeah, we got some more ideas coming, which we think will go down well. I want to make a new version of that tool, the Find Co-founders tool as well. It's
Nice.
like there's been some feedback we need to kind of that we're looking to do. We'd like to make it maybe more of a real product, not like an Airtable form. We'll see.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love this overall strategy of building small tools to get the marketing juices out. And another
Yeah.
thing that you're doing, which I found really interesting, was you're turning your live interviews in the community into a podcast.
Yeah,
Speak
yeah,
about
yeah,
that
yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, so that's something that we do offer is we do live talks with founders for our members, and there's a Q&A at the end so they can post their own questions, and they come up with questions that I would never have thought of. So that's actually a really good like feature of it because we end up with some really interesting content off the back of that stuff, because we've got members with very different backgrounds and perspectives to me. And so
Mhm.
I can't predict every question people may want me to ask, right? Even if I try and get that in advance. And so I thought we'd combine this and like, I was like, what if we just recorded it and just like edited it nicely and made it a podcast? And that's Ramen FM. We've been a little quiet in recent months. I've had like just a lot going on, just basically, and maybe try and do too many things at once. But we found it's actually worked surprisingly well. It was kind of experiments to try and kill two birds with one stone. It's like do a live event and record it for content. And I was like, maybe we're trying to do too much and it's not going to sound good. But like it's actually been very well received when we've actually posted the podcasts. So, it's definitely like not it's not a podcast that's like finished. It's not something we do frequently enough. It's not going anywhere, but we're having a little bit of a pause right now, just while I figure out my own sort of time availability, basically.
Yeah, no, that just happens. I guess it's a natural part of creating any podcast. You can, whenever you resume it, you can just call it another season.
Yeah, 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 exactly.
Yeah, but I love this idea, and this is something that more community builders should do, just repurpose their existing content and invest some effort into creating more, like helping, like make once and use twice kind of a mentality.
Yeah. So one thing I do though, which helps, is like we just say like, look, everyone that's on the call, just post your questions in the chat, and we'll just get to them at the end of the interview, basically.
Mhm.
So we tend not to break it up too much. Sometimes though, I see a question that like really makes sense in the context, and I'll just ask it. And I don't know, like even though like I'm referring to like other people posting in the chat on the podcast, I don't think people actually mind it. It sounds quite organic sort of thing. So I don't know. It's kind of not gone down as badly as I predicted, basically.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's a very solid idea. A quick side note while we're on the topic of podcast and these interviews, how do you pick the guests for these interviews?
So a lot of the people on the podcast so far have been Ramen Club members, actually. So, we try and speak to we try and prioritize people who are already in the community because we've got a lot of people who have done really well. But we always try to speak to people who have reached their ramen profitable goal. So that's usually like at least $3,000 to $5,000 a month or something, depending where you live and your like sort of
Yeah.
family circumstances and stuff. But yeah, those are the main criteria. We also generally try and speak to people who are building more like products or like SaaS businesses, because that's what speaks to most of our audience, to be honest, and most of our community. Yeah, that's kind of the main criteria. Like I have like made an effort.
Yeah, that's really cool. And once again, I really like how you're able to essentially leverage your resources. And this time you're able to leverage the existing community members who have already done like a lot of commendable progress on their business. And that powers the guest list for your podcast. So that is really cool.
Yeah, because the benefit, an additional benefit of doing a live interview with your existing members is just like it helps your other members get to know like other members and like, oh, I didn't, because you go
Yeah,
so deep, right? They're like, oh, wow, I
yeah,
didn't know this person's story. And they like, it helps build connection with the community, like, because they're building connection to
for
another
sure.
member. I think it also creates like a sense of pride as well that you're in this community and oh wow, look, here's someone that I know and like, look how well they're doing and like they have so many interesting like stories and stuff and lessons. So yeah, I think there's something to doing that. And we're not only going to interview people in the community, we're also there's plenty of people outside who are definitely worth speaking to. But yeah, I think it's a good thing to do.
No, I agree. And this is a really good segue into the next segment, which is going to be all about how you are enabling the person-to-person connection through Ramen Club and through the indie biz communities. So this is something that a lot of communities go wrong on, which is they do not have enough programs or at least good enough programs so that members can make peer-to-peer connections. But you're definitely a gas in this area. So I want you to tell us your secrets here. Can you start with the accountability masterminds, how you organize them?
Yeah, so generally how we've organized those is like, you do when people sign up to do one, you do a survey of like, like what stage you're at, what you're looking for, when you're free, like just stuff like your time zone, like what your logistical things like that as well. And we just try and match people who are in the same sort of, you know, s- at the same stage. Generally, people want to speak to people like who are at a similar stage to them. Like there are obviously exceptions, but generally in the context of a mastermind where it's an ongoing thing, not just like a one-off conversation, people tend to want to speak to people who are like in the same stage as them or similar, right? In my experience. And currently we do it with like in the past we tend to do it with like three people in a mastermind, but I'm actually thinking of doing it with two for a bit, just because it's a lot easier to match to a group of two than three, unless you've
Right.
got like
Mm.
huge amounts of people to draw from. Because the chances that people are at the same stage and in the good time zone available at the same time, they got good personality like bond. It's just harder the bigger the group, basically. So yeah, I'm actually thinking of making that down to two instead of three for a bit and trying that. Um, and yeah, and so once we kind of match people, then I usually do a session where like I just onboard them to it. So I'll join the session, just talk them through the format. And it's just generally every 2 weeks you catch up and share what you want to get done next time, what you got done since last time, and just troubleshooting. And we find that people who keep doing it, like they tend to adapt the format as they see fit based on what works for them. And like we don't stop them from doing that. And I find that actually like the people with the most longevity in it it kind of moves on from the accountability very quickly. Like accountability is one of those weird things where like a lot of people like say they want it, but they kind of like, I don't know. I think there are some things that people say they want, but they don't want as much as they say they want, basically.
Yeah.
What I found that people like actually want is the trouble is the kind of venting about like challenges that they're having and troubleshooting, which is like helping each other solve problems. But the actual like, oh, I said you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it. Like it's kind of like I find that people actually quickly sort of stop doing that and just move on to troubleshooting and sharing their challenges. And I think it's just an
Mm,
interesting insight, you know, that's kind of what people actually gravitate to. I'm not saying no one wants accountability. Like obviously it's a large world, right? But just like within my sort of little world, like that's just what I've
yeah.
observed kind of thing, you know?
Mm, mm. Um, and how do people solve each other's challenge? So what I mean by that is if an accountability, if like let's say a mastermind group has three people who are in similar stages, and all three of them are, let's say they're in similar stages, and when it comes to their SaaS business, they're making less than 500 MRR, and their
Yeah.
main goal is to get it to the next stage, which is let's say 5,000 MRR. Now, how like all three of if all three of them are going to come at it and be like, hey, I need help troubleshooting the how do I get more signups to my application, then how how do you like how do you ensure that the conversation is still useful for the members if nobody in that group has done it before?
Well, I mean, I know lots of people who've worked it out. Um, you know, like I don't think you have to be in a mastermind with people who've done it to figure out how to do it. Like I never had a community builder who'd made a community that like I have to advise me. You just kind of read a lot and you try things and you figure it out, sort of thing. I'm not saying that stuff doesn't help, but like they can ask him. There's lots of other places outside that mastermind they can kind of get advice, like you know, books, podcasts, asking other members, that sort of thing. But generally, in a mastermind that's ongoing, generally people want to be with people at a similar stage to them, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's often not realistic to get a good bunch of people who are very early stage with someone that's super late stage because the
Yeah,
super late stage person is just doing them a favor, generally
yeah,
speaking, you
exactly.
know. So
Yeah,
it's very hard to scale that in my experience. And so
yeah,
generally you
I
try and
agree.
get people who are at a similar stage, but a lot of the people I know who generally tend to go on and do the best or the fastest, they read a lot and they're constantly learning and like consuming information sort of thing. And so chances are that someone else in that group, even if they haven't got to that stage, they have like seen an example, read a case study of like what someone else did that like got to them to that stage, you know? But generally speaking,
Mm,
though, the advice is much more granular than, oh, how do I get to 500 MRR? It's more like, oh, this I'm having this bug in my database I can't solve. Can anyone here like figure out how I can do that? Or, hey, my conversion rate is only 0.5%. Has anyone read any good resources for how to improve your conversion rate? And someone's like, yeah, here you go. Or, oh, speak to this person, you know? And so
mm,
there's lots of ways you can kind of troubleshoot stuff, but there's so many different things that it can be that it just
yeah.
very really does vary. But you know, one of the reasons that we're working on this sort of like framework that I touched upon earlier is, you know, to give people a bit of like grounding of like based on the stage you're at, this is like all the most common advice of like what to do or who to speak to or what to read to get to the next stage, if that makes sense. You know, whether you're looking generally stages like you're looking for an idea in the first place or you're building the first version, just starting to like test it and monetize it. Okay, people are using it and paying. Like, how do you grow this? Like, how do you systemize this and hire a team? You know, just like going through each of these stages. There's just a lot of very common advice of how to go from A to B in each stage. And a lot of this advice we give every day in Ramen Club from various people. So we're looking to like, I think combining the masterminds with like some content like this that helps them have like a sort of main source of truth. I think that's probably the next phase for us of doing these, I reckon.
I love this. And while you were speaking, yeah, I'm like pretty sold on masterminds and the idea of conducting them. But can you help me understand how it looks like from your end? Like, how do you manage these masterminds? So when I'm thinking about starting a mastermind group for my 200-person community on Slack, I'm thinking, how can I even keep track of who is in which mastermind, and if people want to switch, or if somebody ends up in a mastermind where the other two people are just, not showing up, then how do I manage all of that? So what's your information? So yeah.
So I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers to masterminds because they're actually not that easy to organize long
How
term
do you do
because
that?
a lot of it's actually quite common that people will come no matter how much time you spent matching them, and they may just not show up again, and they'll never give a
Yeah.
reason for it. Do you know what I mean? And so something else that we're actually going to try is like you have to have done something to get access to the mastermind. So that could be like, for example, being a member for X number of months or have contributed this number of times, and then you get access to the masterminds. I've seen in, for example, trends.vc has a community where
Yeah.
you have to participate in, say, 5 stand-ups, I think, and then you get access to you unlock the masterminds. So I think that's actually something we'll probably try in the future to kind of it's to try and weed out people who are just half-heartedly like trying it out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I do.
but we kind of decentralize them quite a lot. So like, we're involved in setting them up and onboarding them, but generally speaking, we then sort of leave them to it. So it's for them to sort of self-organize. And some of them last a very long time, some of them don't. But I'm looking for ways to look at how we can create more longevity with them, basically.
Hmm. Yeah. That is, I think, the central problem a lot of people that makes a lot of people afraid to even start a mastermind program in their communities.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like it's one of the things that sounds simple, but
Yeah.
the reality of human nature is it's a bit harder than it first looks. So you just got to try different things. Another technique I've heard is you don't make them permanent. There's actually like a point where like it ends after, say, 3 months, as an example, and everyone has to
Yeah.
opt in to continue. So there's like different ways to do it. But yeah, there's a few things where you can always optimize things. So yeah, we're gonna keep on improving things.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. And then the second thing that you mentioned, you touched upon a bit earlier, is that you help other people organize local indie biz meetups. You mentioned that people can just reach out to you if they want to organize it in their city. But can you speak a little bit about how you help a person organize an indie biz? Like if I wanted to organize an indie biz in the city of Bangalore in India, then
Yeah.
how would you help me do that? Because I'm somebody who does not know a lot of indie hackers in my city, and I have never hosted like a meetup before.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. So indie beers is so back to the beginning, end of 2018, we started this in London, and we just kept doing it every month. And the purpose of the way we designed it deliberately to be very easy to organize so that you can do it every month. Because there was actually a reason for this, like because there's a lot of meetups you see in London and everywhere where a lot of people do meetups like aren't experienced with managing events, and they try and do too much. They try and have like, oh, we're going to have like speakers, and we're going to have like drinks and food and sponsors, and we're going to hire this big room, and we're going to film everything, and we're going to make content. And they try and do this like every month, and they do it once and they realize, oh my God, this is like 100 times more work than I realized this was. And a lot of people do it and they burn out, and like they stop doing it after like 6 months or a year. I've seen it lots of times, right? And I also found just a lot of meetups, like that entrepreneurship meetups are just like very formal. So like very in like some corporate office or air-conditioned co-working space with no music. The lights are so bright, like everyone's got like holding a warm beer with like name tags. There's a couple of like not very good talks and lots of awkward networking, and that's how a lot of meetups are, right? Realistically. And I was just like, how do we do something that's just not like any of this and is much more informal? That's the first thing. Informal, simple, fun, and just like easy to organize. And that's how I kind of came up with indie beers, which is so you might not do this in every country, but like in the UK, part of most UK culture is to go to the pub is part of UK culture. You know, some people don't like this, but it's just a reality. And every month we just go to the pub from 6 till it's open from 6 till 11, but like people don't have to be there the whole time. People just come and go. And, you know, people just have a couple of drinks and just talk about what they're working on. It's very informal, it's very chilled, it's very fun. I do think people really like it. But yeah, but because it's so simple to organize, we could just done it every month non-stop for 5 years. And that means we've actually built like a really solid community and like real friends and like co-founders and people who've hired like 15 people from the community and stuff like that. And
Wow.
just the consistency of doing this in like an informal way actually beats doing like a really elaborate big event like 3 times a year. People don't need much to have fun and meet each other. They don't need a big room with like cameras. Like they don't. And so like, that's kind
Yeah.
of the approach we took. So I haven't answered your original question yet, but I'm getting there. Don't worry. Um, so we deliberately did this in a way that was as simple as possible and just like as replicatable as possible. But there's also a Slack and a newsletter, but like, you know, that helps people keep in touch and whatever. But anyway, so after a while, after maybe there was a break during COVID, but like let's move to after COVID. Like we started getting, you know, I think some of us went on a trip to Lisbon a couple of years ago, and we were like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome to do indie biz here? And so we just, you know, we had a friend locally, Thomas, and now Elston helps run it as well. He's in Lisbon a lot. And we're just like, okay, let's just like do this here. And so, you know, we've got people who are in Lisbon or they're in and out of Lisbon a lot. And it's kind of just like a meetup in a box. So we've kind of within this sort of niche, we kind of have a bit of a brand of indie beers that like I'm not saying everyone knows what indie beers is, but like, you know, it's kind of reasonably well known within the bootstrapper world that indie beers is this like fun pub meetup in London and some other places, right? And we've got a brand, we've got a logo that's like reasonably recognizable. I think it is anyway. Some people probably don't know what it is. And we just give the basics of what you need. So like the main things we give to help you. So like if let's say you were going to start doing this in Bangalore, is that right? Yeah, I thought so. So the first thing I give you a Meetup Pro account. So I pay for that. And that actually helps your distribution really well, right? And then I help on like promote on Twitter, on LinkedIn, that sort of thing. So first of all, it's like Meetup Pro account and promotion, and that's actually a big part of it. And it's a kind of reasonably it's known enough that I think it makes some kind of difference. And obviously you promote it on like the Indie Hackers website and that helps. Then I just give you I can help give you some advice on like just how to do a meetup. You know, it's a fairly simple meetup. So like, but still, you know, I usually give people some tips. One thing we don't do name tags, and just because we find it's just like very formal, and not everyone agrees with me on this, and I understand that. That's fine. I'm not saying I will never change my mind, but we just give a little sticker. It's a little Indie Beers sticker of our logo, and it's just so you know who's because usually it's like an informal place, like a bar or somewhere, right? And it's just so you know who's there for the meetup, but it's not as formal as the sticker. Like I don't know, there's something about having the sticker name tag. There's something about having a name tag which just makes you think, oh, corporate, like sad
Yeah.
meetup, you know? And it's just a
Yeah.
bit more fun and chilled and informal with like having a little Indie Biz logo because it's a cute little logo, I think. And that's the main thing. Yeah. So promotion, use the brand. I send you like brand assets. So like I help you make flyers and that sort of thing. We've got like a look and feel for that. We've got a brand. Yeah, and I pay for stuff like the stickers, like Meetup. I'll pay for people's like drinks. Like I'll cover if you have a couple of drinks or whatever it is, like I'll cover your bill. And yeah, it just
Mhm.
like helps. I find that the people who do this, like they want to do it for fun, but like it's a really good way to meet people hosting meetups. It's actually way easier. So even if you're an introvert, this is actually like something I say a lot. It's like if you're an introvert, it's easier to host a meetup than attend a meetup, which sounds insane. but it's actually true. It's like easier to host it and run an event than it is to attend an event because you just have a reason to talk to anyone. Like you don't need an excuse to talk to anyone or leave a conversation or whatever because you're running the meetup. You're always busy. You're always greeting people. And so it's actually a very good way just to meet people, to like get experience with, community building. And it's just fun, it's just like, why not? It's a good thing to do in life. So yeah, that's kind of how we do that. It's like a simple meetup in a box that I would give to people like yourself. And it's Yash.
I love this so much, and this is such a unique thing that if you're an introvert, which I am, I consider myself an introvert, it's easier to host a meetup. And I I don't know why I've never thought of it, even though I'm living it right now with the podcast. Like it's so easy for me to talk to people like you and amazing people, other amazing people, as I have them as guests on the podcast, just because I have this podcast. And I can be like, hey, I've got this podcast. Want to spend 1 hour of your time on the podcast talking to me? And I'm telling you, man, I'm not that interesting of a person. Like nobody would give me an hour of their time if it wasn't for the podcast. So
I believe. Come on, come on. I'm sure they would.
yeah.
I'm sure they would. But you know what? It's the same. It's
But
the
this is
same.
such
Is
a
that?
hack.
It's actually the same concepts. Yeah, it's a similar concepts. Hosting a podcast. For introverts, it can be easier to host a podcast than have a conversation with a stranger, right? And it sounds like
Yeah.
it should be harder for you to host a podcast, but it's not true. And it's the same for, it's easy if you, it might, I don't know you that well. We just met recently, but it might well be easier for you to host a meetup than to go to a meetup and try and talk to
Yeah.
strangers. And yeah, it's like an underrated hack, I think.
Yeah. I love this. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this, Charlie.
That's all good.
Okay, so last question. Okay, last couple of questions for the interview. The
Sure.
first one is talk about your engagement strategy and how it has changed across the years with Ramen Club. Like, do you do anything to make sure that there's conversations happening in the community, or so that it doesn't just end up dead?
Yeah, so there's a few kind of things here. So, I mean, one thing is like a common strategy is just like asking questions. So, like the community manager, like, so Rosie Sherry is very good at this, for example. So, just posting an interesting question, like, a basic example for like something like Rama Club is like, do you have any goals for this month? How are you getting on towards them? Or something like that. Or recently, or something that's topical in the news. So recently that AI development, AI bot Devin came out, and I don't know whether that's like a serious thing or not yet, but I shared like the video and just like asked people what their opinion is on it. Do they think it's like, overrated? Do they think it's interesting? Just to get some conversation. And just doing that let's say once a week, that makes a huge difference, that kind of thing. Just the art of asking like quality questions. I also try and keep on top of messages which have not been replied to. And that is a constant battle. And because if people post enough times in a community and no one answers, they're probably going to leave, right? And
Yeah.
so that's actually something which is something to watch out for. Very again, very common is just have like a digest. So we just have a monthly newsletter which we also post in Slack, which just has like all the kind of new launches and wins in the community, like highlighting interesting conversations, new stuff, upcoming events, like that kind of stuff. Like it's important to engage your community outside of the main platform it's on. So like if you're on Discord or Slack, your community is not just on Discord or Slack, it's also on Twitter, it's also like users email. Like you need to factor in these other touch points. So one thing we do on Twitter is we have a Twitter list of all our members, and so members can easily follow the list and see what other members are up to. And you're creating another connection outside the community, sort of thing. So thinking like multi-platform is generally, I think, is a good modern way to think of communities, even if you have a main like hub. For us, I consider in-person IRL as a form of platform. It's in real life, like that's kind of a platform, I guess. But that's always a big part because we do a lot of in-person stuff for people in London. We want to do this for other cities as well at some point. Like it's just hard to organize from afar when I'm not
Yeah.
there. But like we're working on it. But when you have an online community and you have a good core of in-person people, it actually, that energy, those connections translates to the online community as well, because the in-person people are very active. They're more, they're on average, they're a bit more engaged even on the online community. And the people who are just online, they feel that. So I actually think there is a benefit to having hybrid communities, like for that reason, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is such a great point about having like making sure and realizing that your community is not just your Slack or your Discord, and making
Yeah.
sure that you engage them in other touch points, even though it's like really small stuff like creating a Twitter list or sending a roundup, like monthly roundup email. This is really smart.
Mm.
I love this.
Yeah, yeah, like all that stuff is good. And having rituals for your community, like the most commonly recommended book I give on community is very basic. I'm not saying there are no better books, but like this is one I just recommend a lot, just because it's short as well and simple. Is Get Together by Bailey Richardson. And she just breaks down the kind of components of starting a community just very nicely. It's just have a clear idea about like who is it for, and what is the purpose, like what are you getting people together for. So at Ramen Club, it's for, generally speaking, earlier stage product builders and SaaS founders who want to make enough to quit their job and have financial freedom. So that's kind of what it's for, and we're here to help each other towards those goals. And it's quite simple, but like it should be simple. But then it always talks about something called rituals as well. And I think of rituals in communities kind of like how products think of features. So like rituals are sort of like things you do together to help advance the objective of the community. So for example, in something like Ramen Club, it can be like people regularly, like we have a Slack bot which shows your sort of daily posting streaks, and that's like a kind of daily ritual. We have people sharing like what they're working on today or what they just shipped, and we made a tool that kind of gamifies it. Or we've got like a channel called Struggle Bus, which was named by one of our members, and it's just like we have a ritual of occasionally just sharing when stuff is not going so well, and just like some of it's funny, some of it's like serious, and we just trying to like share that with the community, and sort of it's a way to sort of bond and that sort of thing. So yeah, generally speaking, like any community, think about why you exist and what you're there for, and think of different rituals you can have. And I think actually it'd be good to like I'm thinking of making maybe like a list of examples of these, like, because give people inspiration.
Yeah,
But that's another thing that we do
that would be
as well.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you create this list of examples, I'll be like, this will be great. Like, we can put it on the show notes and listeners can check it out. And I also create a playbook out of every episode and
Yeah.
publish it as a blog. So I'll add it out there as well.
Nice. Yeah, cool. That sounds good.
Yeah. And about the tool that you mentioned, can you speak a little more about the tool for accountability that you created in your Slack, which helps, people be consistent with their posting?
Yeah, so there's so many platforms and products which have leaderboards and gamification as just like a core feature that keeps people coming back. That just makes, you know, making progress a bit more fun and a bit more sort of competitive and stuff. So like the best example is Duolingo. So most people have used Duolingo, and it has the daily posting streaks, and they just make posting an update super fun. And this exists in some maker communities like whip.co, and possibly also Makerlog as well. They have like regular update leaderboards, like the consecutive days you post an update. And all the idea for it is, this idea was called Power Up, related to like gaming sort of lore. It just lets you install a leaderboard in your own Slack community. And one day we may make it work in other places like Discord as well, for example. But yeah, it lets you like select a channel. Let's say you've got a channel called like work in progress or ships or done or to do, or something like that. It's quite common to have these channels where people just share updates on their progress or their work. And it just gamifies it. So it just like tracks the consecutive days people post updates. You can like get it to ignore weekends so people can have the weekend off, which works pretty well. And it just creates a really slick leaderboard showing who has posted the most consecutive days. And we've added lots of fun surprises. So like there's really fun gifts for different milestones. Like when you hit like a 10-day or 3-day posting streak, you get a really fun GIF, and you get we've included it for lots of different situations, like, you know, when you lose your streak, when you've come back after a long time, when you hit like 20 total posts, when you hit like 10 days in a row. Like we're trying to make it like it's a real like game, honestly. So yeah, that's something fun we've been working on. We're testing it in a few communities, and yeah, we'll have something that will be ready to launch pretty soon. I want to say in the next couple of months. But yeah, yeah, I expect to hear more on that soon. But it's been really fun to work on with my good friend Dan.
I love this. This sounds like a really cool tool to plug into any Slack communities. I'll, link. Is there a link that I can send people to so that they can, just apply to get on the wait list or something like that?
Yeah, I'll share you a link in the show notes where
Okay.
I for now I would say it will just be a short form where you can say, "Hey, I want this," and we'll
Yeah.
send you a link. It's not quite in
Yeah.
the Slack app directory
Yeah.
yet,
Yeah.
but like we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll add it in the show notes. If you're listening, just check out the show notes for the link to.
Yep. Yep. It's super fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on this interview, Charlie. It has been a pleasure learning from you, and I'm 100% sure that listeners listening to it will be able to just apply the lessons and the tactics that we've shared over here to build their own community businesses.
Yep. Well, let's hope so. And yeah, thanks for having me on, Nitya. It's been great to chat to you.